Hi guys, welcome back. Now this is going to be a very important video. I want you all to watch it till the end and also share it with as many people as you can so that everyone can benefit. A lot of important things will be discussed in your videos, and we will discuss about the time management thing. We'll discuss about how to attempt the paper, what questions to select, and also some key areas that I would specifically want to discuss, regarding conclusions and introductions and diagrams. So a lot has to be discussed in this video. So let's get started without wasting any time. Firstly, guys, remember that, when you're attempting your paper, or let's say when you will get your paper in the hand, the first thing is that when you get the paper in your hand, do not spend a lot of time in reading the entire paper, which means that students waste a lot of time in reading section B and section C, and they just want to validate themselves, or they just want to tell themselves, okay fine, the paper is easy and hard, but then what's the point? Because you need to choose one question from section B or section C, and ultimately you just have to do all three sections. So there's no point in spending 5-10 minutes and then looking at each other's face to validate the expressions, and you'll be like, okay fine, what, the paper is easy, the paper is hard. All of this will just either give you some sort of panic or trigger your anxieties, which you might already be probably in, on the day of the exam. So see, you need to manage your anxieties tomorrow. And what you need to do is that instead, when you get the paper, the moment the examiner says start the paper or start the exam, and when you open the paper, I strongly suggest my students do not look at section B or section C. Although ultimately students do end up, peeping into section B or section C. If you want to peep into it, but ideally you shouldn't, because it will just trigger your anxiety. Ultimately, what will happen is that maybe you see a topic that you hadn't prepared for and you freak out, and then that will make your section A bad as well, right? So you need to gain confidence when you're attempting section B and section C. So what I suggest is that when you get the paper, directly start with section A. Don't look and don't open section B or section C, right? Try to avoid peeping into section B and section C. Ultimately, you have to attempt section B and section C. Now, you can't really avoid that. So ultimately you will reach there, and when the time comes and you reach there, then you do your analysis on section B and C. So the thing is that directly start with section A, because you can't, and like I said, the first 40 minutes of the paper, you have to keep yourself calm and composed, and you need to tell yourself that you know it, right? Because confidence is the key. And once you're done with section A, my strategy is that I tell my students to take 40 minutes on, maximum 40 minutes on section A. So your confidence will automatically go up once you are done with section A properly. Again, you see, do not waste time in spending 5-10 minutes. We are very short of time in economics. In economics, there are a lot of students who know each and everything, but they do not manage their time properly, and they end up not finishing the paper. And this will happen to majority students tomorrow. A lot of them will end up, you will see your friends telling you, we were unable to complete the paper. Time management is the key for tomorrow. So when you get the paper, start with section A, ignore section B, section C. When the time comes, you'll see that. Secondly, few things that you need to keep in mind is that you need to finish your case study maximum 35 to 40 minutes, not more than that. And I'll tell you how you can do that. The thing is that, firstly, number one, do not spend a whole lot of time in reading the case study. Why? Because the questions of the case study, although they are coming from the case study, but technically there is more analysis and evaluation rather than you extracting data from the case study. References are made in the questions from the case study, but then the answer is more based on your knowledge analysis and evaluation of the content or the syllabus itself. It's asking more directly from the syllabus. So the knowledge that you have to apply is coming directly from the syllabus rather than directly coming from the case study itself. So you can quickly brush up the case study, quickly read through it, and then you can attempt the questions. And then as far as those questions that are concerned, what is happening to the GDP data or the current account data, or what has happened to the inflation values in the particular year from this year to that year, over there you can read the paragraphs again, or you can read the table again, or in whatever format the data is given. So you see, maximum take 4 minutes to read the case study. Don't spend lots of time. Also remember that your case study comes like this, 2 mark question, 2 mark question, 4 mark question, 6 and 6. So the last two questions are 6 marks, and then it's 2 and 4. And in some instances, you've also seen that instead of giving a 4 mark question, they give 2 marks question. They have been doing. So we aren't really sure whether the 4-mark question would be a 4-mark one or it could be divided into 2 and 2. They have after 2023 they have in one of the papers they did give it, they did divide the 4-mark into a 2-mark, but that is irrelevant. What is more relevant is that the last 2 questions are of 6 marks, and so students waste a lot of time in attempt in this part of the the first 3 questions, 2, 2 and 4 mark. But you see, you're comparing 2, 2 and 4 means that here you have 2, 2 and 4 is basically 8 marks, right? So you have 8 marks here, and then 6 and 6 you have 12 marks here. So definitely this has more weightage. So you need to give the last 2 questions more time. If you want to attempt the last 2 questions first, you can't do that. It's up to you. But you will spend a maximum of 12 minutes maximum on the first 3 questions. That is the 2, 2 and 4 mark question. And if the 4 mark is divided into 2 and 2, so maximum all the questions preceding the 6 markers in the case study, you will spend a maximum of 12 minutes, not more than that. See, you have to have the timer. You have to be aware of the watch, and you have to be aware of the time in tomorrow's paper. This is the key. Otherwise, you will not be able to finish the paper on time, right? So 12 minutes maximum. Now, if this exceeds from 12 minutes to this goes to 13, so you can keep a margin of 2 more minutes. It could maximum exceed 14. So plus 2 minus 2, that's okay, right? But not more. And then the 6 mark questions in the case study, you will spend a maximum of 24-25 minutes. In this way, you will end up finishing the case study in a maximum of 40 minutes. See, you have to finish the case study in 40 minutes, not more, right? Otherwise, you will not be able to finish the paper. And the reason why students are not able to finish the paper is they read the case study, they freak out. Oh my God, what's happening with me? So the first 10-15 minutes are wasted in calming themselves down. See, you can't do that, because a lot of, like I said, they end up looking at section B, section C, and then figuring out what questions will they attempt in section B, section C, when they are first going to attempt section A, and they are figuring out mentally, unconsciously, that what should they attempt in section B and C. So this is all energy is wasted and time wasted, right? Don't do that, please. Okay. Yes. So this is how you need to divide your 40 minutes for case study. 25 minutes maximum, 6 marks, 12 marks for the first 3-4 questions. For trend analysis, remember that when a question for trend analysis comes in, trend analysis simply means that you need to, they ask you to, explain the values of, maybe it could be a terms of trade could be given, a current account deficit surplus could be given, budget balance could be given, maybe inflation could be given, unemployment could be given, a growth could be given, but anything. For trend analysis, do not copy paste the number. So you see, if they ask, so let's say if current account values are given from 2015 to 2020, and the examiner wants you to assess what's happening from 2015 to 2020. So the examiner here wants you to assess the nature of the change rather than you giving the absolute values. That, in 2015, the current account deficit was maybe 5 million, and in 2020, the current account deficit is 10 million. So this is so the examiner can also see that value. So the examiner wants you to know that the deficit has increased, sharply increased, steeply increased, or maybe slowly gone up. If a trend line is given. So the examiner wants you to tell the nature of the change rather than the absolute value. Remember that, because if you just give the value, you will not be awarded. 0 marks will be given. Okay. And regarding trend analysis, I think I have covered this in my case studies past paper solutions playlist as well. I remember in one of the few case studies I did mention what words you could use regarding trend analysis. Right, guys? So up till now, I think we are done with, probably I'm recording this video right now, so the first 8, 9, 10 minutes have passed. And if you are following, please do mention in the comments that you're able to understand what I'm saying. I do read all the comments and I'll reply back to you on this video, so that we can sort of have a small, chat, or maybe some sort of a question answer session as well in the comments down below. We can have that as well. I'll just respond to you on the comments. Now assuming that you're done with section A, you have completed the case study. Now we come to section B and section C. And here is where the real game starts. And you see, section B, section C, and we are assuming that you took 40 minutes. You took full 40 minutes. Now, assuming that you took full 40 minutes, now you have 80 minutes so you took full 40 minutes in section A, you have 80 minutes left now for the paper, because you will have total 120 minutes. So now you have 80 minutes left now. In 80 minutes, it means that we are dividing it equally between section B and section C. So whatever we do in section B, it means we will repeat it in section C. So the time management in section B will be repeated exactly the same way in C. So we have 40 minutes for section B, which means that 15 minutes we should allocate for 8-mark questions and 25 minutes for 12-mark questions. In this way, so which means that 40 minutes is the maximum time for section B and 40 minutes for section C. You can do section B first as well. You can do section C first as well. That is not a problem. So let's say if you do section B first and you do part A of section B and then you move to section C and then you repeat part B later on, that's okay. This is not a problem, right? So, section B, 15 minutes for 8-mark questions, 25 minutes for 12-mark questions, dot. Remember, you cannot exceed this time. Otherwise, you will not. So a lot of times what happens is that, people, let's say in section B. So let's say you attempt a question on maybe, I don't know, maybe subsidies or maybe government intervention, or let's say the question comes on elasticity, let's say. So and let's say you're so well prepared on elasticity and in the morning you revised, elasticity like XCD or YD, whatever, okay? So, and the same question came that you revised, and now you're really happy about it and you write so much that you forget that, 50 minutes have passed. But you see, and here is where the problem happens. So you must finish it in 40 minutes. That is it, right? You have to keep this time management in front of you. Otherwise, you will regret later on and you will not be able to complete the paper. Anyways, and the same time management policy will apply in section C as well. Otherwise, you will not be able to complete the paper. I am telling you, every year I see lots and lots of students telling me I was unable to complete the paper. A-star students ending up with bad grades. Why? Because they could not complete the paper on time. Also, guys, remember that, the choice of, so let's say that you are faced with a dilemma or a paradox or a very conflicting situation where, you have in section B, you have, let's say section B, a question for part A 8 marks, and then you have part B 12 marks, and let's say the next question is also section B part A 8 marks, part B 12 marks, and the same would apply for section C as well. But so let's say that this very well, 8 marks very well, as in you feel that you know more than the examiner for the 8-mark question, and 12 you're like not that good, right? You're not that good. Now the next question, you don't like this question. You don't like the topic. In fact, you don't like the topic, but you know the topic. You don't like it, but you know it. You know what to write in it, but you don't like it. So no one cares about whether you like it or not you like it. And you shouldn't even care whether this is not your personal, the examiner is not concerned how you feel about the topic, neither you should be concerned about how you feel about the topic. If you know the topic, you know what to write in it, even if you dislike or hate it, but you know what to write in it, attempt it. Okay? So if you don't like the topic, so let's assume that you don't like the topic, but you know what to write in it. Okay? And let's say that you know it decently, and you know the 12 marker decently as well. But you see, so which question will you attempt? Will you attempt this question or this question? Although you want to attempt this question, why? You want to attempt this question, why? Because you know the 8 marker so well, you're like, what, I am the king of this topic for the 8 marker question and I know more than the examiner. You will make a big mistake attempting this topic. Although for the next question, this question, you don't like the topic, number one. Number two, you know it decently, not very well as of this topic. But the thing is that if you look at the 12 marker for this particular question, then you don't know the 12 marker that well. You don't really know what to write in the 12 marker. You are confused about the question. You are not understanding the question properly, and you don't really know what to write in it. Right? So in this scenario, what you should do? You should attempt the question that you know average of both. Because you see, let's say even if you get 8 on 8 over here, but over here you end up out of 12, you end up getting maybe 4 out of 12. So you will get 12 out of 20. Obviously not a good score. But if you know this decently, maybe you won't get 8 on 8, you will probably get 5 on 8, and maybe out of 12, you will probably get 9 on 12, and 9 plus 5 is how much? 9 plus 5 is 14, right? 14 out of 20. So it's still better than 12, right? So what you need to do is, and so understood. So this choice that you will make will play a very important role in also having a psychological impact on you as well, right? Because understood, guys. And you never know what probably maybe you think that you have written it decently, maybe you have really high expectations of yourself, but maybe the examiner grades you well. So the choice of the question that you need to take in the exam, if both the parts you should be knowing at least decently. It's not that one part you know better, the other part you don't know better, do not attempt that question. You should have a decent of both the parts, the knowledge decent of both the parts. Okay? And the same concept will apply for section C as well. Okay, guys. Now moving forward, remember that when the examiners grade your answers, and I have mentioned this several times in my past paper solution videos as well, that the grading is done more on a qualitative basis, right, rather than a quantitative basis. It's more based on how you're writing it rather than what exactly you're writing it. So even if you're writing correct, but you're writing it wrongly, you're not writing the complete chain of analysis. Although what you're writing is right, but you're not writing the complete chain of analysis, you will not get the marks. And you see, every year we have so many students suffering in A-level economics, and those students who have got good grades in O-levels, they end up getting B's and C's and probably even below in A-levels, because you see the approach is very different. O-levels and A-levels is, you can't match the two, right? A-level economics is completely another tangent. It's not difficult. It's just that a lot of students have from the very beginning, they approach it differently. And right now you're watching my video. Honestly tell me, whoever is watching my video, when you studied price elasticity of supply in A-levels, you thought, oh, you know what, the same formula, oh, the same factors. But when you opened the past paper questions of price elasticity of supply, you were shocked. You didn't know what to write. You went blank. Or you were like, oh, you know what, maybe this current account deficit, it's the same topic, or maybe PPC, the same topic, but the past paper question in A-levels is coming completely different. The topic is the same, but the way the examiner is asking you is completely different, and it wants a lot of detail, and you just then go blank, right? Now, number 4. Again, grading. Grading is qualitative rather than quantitative. It is based on how you write, how you explain, the way you make the diagrams, the examples that you give, right? The facts and figures that you state, rather than just based on what you write. And diagrams, examples play a very important role. Even if they don't ask you about to make the diagrams, you have to make the diagram. If there is a relevant diagram, make it. Diagrams corroborate your analysis and your evaluation. It's not that for every point you are supposed to make a diagram, but at least, I say to my students, at least your answer, if they haven't asked you, let's say if they haven't asked you about any diagram in there, but at least make 2 diagrams in the answer. At least a minimum of 2 diagrams to corroborate your analysis or your evaluation should be there. Diagram is modeling what you're saying, and it's important. In economics, economists model things, right? There are 3 ways to explain in economics: theoretically, mathematically, which probably you will study in university, and some of the things in A2 as well, and diagrammatically, right? But I don't know. But whatever, your points must express clarity and they should not be vague. This is important, and I'll give the few examples as well. Also, treat your examiner like a baby, treat your examiner like a student. You are guiding him. You are his guide. Remember, just think that the examiner doesn't know anything. So imagine that you are sitting and a teacher comes in your class. The teacher is conducting his lesson and he's saying things, but he's not explaining what he's saying. It seems like he's just reading from the book, or maybe it seems like he's not explaining what he's saying. So instead of saying things, explain it. Treat the examiner like a student. Just like you judge your teacher on how well he explains, the same applies on the examiner as well, right? Also, remember that about the time management. Please, guys, I cannot stress, this point is so important. You have no idea on how important time management is in paper 2. Time management is the key. Your entire grade majority of it depends upon your time management. Even if you know everything, but your time management goes out of control, you're gone. Pro tip for tomorrow: please finish your paper. Half of the paper was done, and we have seen a lot of students every year. They know everything, and half the paper was done super well. Whatever was done, the student got full marks, but he was unable to finish the last question. 0 marks over there. So that's not no point. It leaves a very bad impression. Leaving a question leaves a bad impression. Remember that. Finish your paper at least. Even if you are not able to perform that question well, finish it. A student with this is very important. A student with good long answers is worse off if his paper is incomplete, versus a student with moderately sized answers expressing clarity and his paper is complete. I'll repeat it. A student with good long answers is worse off. Why is he worse off? Because his paper is incomplete. Versus a student with moderately sized answers but expressing clarity and his paper is complete. Okay? So it's not about writing long answers. Right? And we have data and answer scripts suggesting that moderately sized answers are answers that are not too long, not too short. And those moderately sized answers that properly satisfy all assessment objectives, they have good diagrams made with proper conclusions, they are graded the best marks. The best students who are awarded good marks are those who finish the paper on time. It's not that they write so long, all answers are very, very long. It's not that. It all boils down to your economic expression. Remember. And so the assertion or the narrative that, the more I write, the more marks I get, that narrative is wrong. And the examiner is not a fool, right? You will look like a fool if you write so a lot of times, what happens is that students don't know what to write, but they just write rubbish to fill in the answer scripts. They think that, at least I'll get 1 or 2. You are sitting in an advanced level paper. A levels means advanced level. O level means ordinary level. You're not ordinary student anymore. You're giving an advanced level exam. Your mentality, the way you write, the way you approach, each and everything has to be on that advanced level. Otherwise, you will get 0 marks, and a lot of times you get confused, right? When you see the threshold, you're like, such an easy paper, but out of 60, a student is getting an A on 24, 28. Matlab, in order to get an A, you have to fail? So low? Why the threshold is so low? Threshold is so low because you are writing answers based on O-level knowledge. Your expressions are not in depth. The analysis is weak. The evaluations are weak. The diagrams are not properly drawn. You are writing basic information, O-level information. Obviously, and generally what happens in A2 is that when students end up in A2, they're already aware of the key now. They're already aware. They have probably given the retakes in November. And that is why we see that the thresholds are usually high in A2. So I'm telling you, from an examiner's perspective, that in AS threshold, the grading is strict and the answers are pathetically written. And that is the reason why the threshold is so low. Now, guys, that we have discussed a lot on time management, I would move the discussion to something which is very, 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 very important. I do not want you guys to pause the video or even close the video, because this is the key points that I had to discuss today after time management, and this will definitely help you a lot in tomorrow's exam. And that is that firstly, I'll discuss a bit about assessment objectives, not entirely, but a very small thing. And then we'll move on to how should we draw the diagrams and how should we analyze and how should we evaluate. Things that you must ensure, and I'll also provide some generalized evaluations for different topics as well. Firstly, your assessment objective 1, knowledge and understanding, you start off your answer with key definitions, and so basically your assessment objective 1, AO1, it basically demonstrates knowledge and understanding of concepts, key terms, different theories, some basic diagrams, and interpretation of key basic economic information. That's what your assessment objective 1 is. And also remember that you begin your answers with clear definition of the key terms. Also, during the answer, when in the middle of your answer, if you're introducing a new term in your response, at least give a brief description or a brief definition to sort of enhance the coherence and the effectiveness of your answer. Also, guys, as far as the diagrams are concerned, please follow the steps that I have written over here. Number one, things to keep in mind when making the diagram. So important information. Number one, make sure that the graphs are accurately labeled and drawn. Accurately labeled and drawn means that, for example, if you see this diagram, the diagram is drawn with a scale, right? The diagram is drawn with a scale properly. The demand curve is drawn like this, a straight line. The line is not crooked. It shouldn't be crooked like it's coming like this, not like this. It's a proper straight line. Also remember that when the shading is done, do not, in your answer, for example, do not shade it like this. Don't shade it like this with a pencil. Why? Because your paper will be scanned, and when it will be scanned, the shading can be removed, especially if you are shading it with a light pencil. Okay, so make the diagram with a dark pencil, not with a pen. Make the diagram with a pencil. Okay, I'm repeating this. Make it with a dark pencil, not a light pencil. Okay, so make sure that the graphs are accurately labeled and drawn. Make sure graphs are not made out of context. Make sure graphs are clearly drawn, not too small, not too large either. And I'll talk a bit on this. Explain graphs once you make them. So once you make them, it's not that the diagram looks like a loner on the side of your answer. For example, if you make the diagram, so you should explain like this. The above diagram shows that, or the below diagram shows that. Don't automatically think that the examiner will understand what the diagram is. No, you have to explain or draft a connection with the diagram. The diagram is explaining this is happening in the answer, right? So for example, if you look at this diagram, clear labels have been provided, areas are marked clearly, the diagram is neat and clean and not crammed at all. These are the comments that I'm reading, the examiner comments. And if you look at this answer script, this is an actual examination answer script. If you look at this answer script, look at this diagram. Look at this. Look at the way this diagram has been drawn. I mean, so you see, I mean, you can't even understand what this is, whether this is QS or this is AS or what it is, whether this is QB. You can't just understand this diagram at all, right? So this is a bad diagram. This is a diagram that will not be graded. This is a diagram that will lose marks. This is a diagram that will piss the examiner off. Okay, guys. Now, apart from this, just look at what I've written over here. You know, this diagram is basically sandwiched in between the answer. Because this diagram, so either you're writing like this and then you draw the diagram or whatever this diagram is and then you write below. But this diagram is like sandwiched in between the answer. Don't do it like this, that you draw the diagram in the corner and then all of this is you're utilizing this space for your answer. So when diagrams are sandwiched between analysis and presented in a small or cramped format, it can hinder the assessment experience for the examiner and compromise on the clarity and effectiveness of the student's response. Do not hinder the assessment experience for the examiner. Do not complicate things for the examiner. Okay? If you complicate things for the examiner, it pisses the examiners off, and don't convert the examiner into a bad examiner. A pissed examiner is a bad examiner. Okay? Ensure all diagrams are presented separately from the analysis, preferably placed before or after the relevant analysis. Alright, if diagrams are too small or cramped, consider enlarging them to make them more legible and visually accessible. Okay? This ensures that examiners can clearly see the details of the diagram and understand its relevance to the analysis provided. All of these points matters. Organize the answer, again, in a clear, structured format with each component. Each component means the introduction, analysis, diagram, explanation, evaluation, clearly delineated, right? Ensure that diagrams are clearly labeled and titled as well. For example, if you're drawing a diagram that shows the effect of indirect taxes, so you can say the impact of indirect taxes on consumer produced surplus, you can draw that heading, right? Or maybe if you're drawing a demand pull inflation, you can draw the heading, you can write the heading demand pull inflation or cost push inflation on top of the diagram, right? But this will just it's a better way of writing the answer, right? This just comes in the essay writing tips, because it helps the examiners understand the purpose of the diagram and its connection to the surrounding text. The purpose of the diagram and its connection to the surrounding text. Moving forward, Okay, now coming to analysis, make sure, so what analysis is, I had already covered in my video on assessment objective. It's in my playlist, all I need to know. Now, just a quick recap. When your analysis primarily involves drawing out causes and effects in economic relationships and explaining the likely impact and consequences of changes in economic variables. Like, let's say the AD is going up or down, or AS is going up or down, the likely impact of that change, and then the consequences, the what effect will that have on the wider economy, or etc. etc. This is just a small example that I'm saying, but that is what analysis is. So, and both sides of an economic issue should be considered, and there may be application to example. Now, you need to understand this. Both sides of the economic issue does not necessarily means that evaluation does not necessarily involves giving the other side. For example, if the question asks about the implications of inflation, now the implications of inflation, or the implication or the effects of inflation, can be both positive and negative. So if you're writing both these positive and negative effects of inflation, so this will form under analysis. This doesn't mean that the negative effects of inflation will automatically become evaluation for you. No. Evaluation means a counter narrative. For example, or when you are trying to bring the examiner to a certain conclusion, or a certain, point of view that you're trying to explain. For example, if the question is saying discuss whether inflation is always harmful, and if you're writing, so you tell the examiner, okay, fine, the inflation is beneficial, which would come under analysis, and then you say, however, inflation would also involve certain negative consequences, and you mention the negative consequences, and here you can say that here the negative consequences could form part of evaluation, and then primarily evaluation would be that whether the inflation is harmful or beneficial depends on. So when you are concluding a narrative that, or the assertion that something is beneficial or bad for the economy or for the individual or whatever, the factors that it depends upon is primarily what would form as evaluation. So evaluation involves multiple things, right? It's not just evaluation just involves one thing. It encompasses and envelopes a broad range of things. All right. So as far as your analysis is concerned, it's just the interconnectedness of various economic factors and explaining how each variable is linked with the other. So for example, if the interest rates go up, how the interest rates going up or down would feed through the economy and ultimately impact aggregate demand. So that chain is what analysis is. And I'll give you an example here. For example, I have written two responses. Response 1 with a broken chain of analysis, down below response with a complete chain of analysis but limited analysis. The chain is complete but limited, and then over here you have another response to complete chain and in-depth analysis. 3. So I have given 3 responses. Okay. Now listen to this. First response, response 1, broken chain of analysis. Broken chain of analysis, for example, it says a fall in interest rates. You write down like this. A fall in interest rates would lead to a rise in AD and therefore lead to a rise in GDP. This is correct, but the chain of analysis is broken. Now, what do I mean by this? What do I mean by this is, okay, now look at response 2. Response 2 says a fall in interest rates would lead to a fall in the cost of borrowing, which would encourage borrowing in the economy. Simultaneously, it would lead to a fall in the returns on saving, obviously, because interest rate is going down, so which will discourage savings in the economy. And the composite effect of this would be that consumer expenditure and investments, since households will spend more and firms will expand their operations, and this will lead to injections, that is C&I component of AD, therefore stimulating economic growth and rising national income. Now this is the complete chain, that how a fall in interest rates results in a rise in GDP and AD. Instead of you saying, understood. Now if you look at so response 1 is oversimplistic and incomplete. Oversimplistic and incomplete. While it correctly identifies that a fall in interest rates would lead to a rise in AD, there's nothing wrong in that. This is correct. It lacks depth and fails to articulate the mechanisms through which this occurs. That is how the fall in interest rate will feed through the economy. The complete chain has to be there. So the reason why students end up scoring less marks in their answers, and this is the exact reason why you see thresholds being so low in A-level economics. Because the analysis evaluation is not accurate. In-depth analysis is missing. You have to make sure that your chain of analysis is complete. Right? And if you look at response 1, which says the fall in interest rate would lead to a rise in, and a lot of times students say, you know what? this is exactly what I've written. This is exactly what I've written. While this is exactly what you had written, but the way you had written was wrong. I didn't know why I ended up losing marks in the essay. I don't know why I'm not getting the right marks when this is exactly what I'm writing. I am also right. This is student 1. This is student A, student B. Both students are writing that a fall in interest rates leads to rise in AD and therefore rise in GDP. But it's not about what you write. At the start of the video, I mentioned that. It's about how you write it. And when you say how you write it, it means that the chain of analysis and as far as the assessment objective 3 evaluation is complete, is made, it has to be complete. It has to be the way it is supposed to be, right? So this response, that is response 1, does not adequately explains why falling interest rates would lead to an increase in AD and how this ultimately translates into rising GDP. While response 2, right, is a coherent analysis. It is a coherent analysis, which means that it is demonstrating higher level skill of the student by identifying the chain of causation. Chain of causation means that how one cause is leading to the other and how that is leading to the other. And another thing to make sure is to consider in that analysis that go into depth. That is, for example, when the examiner will be marking your essays, the chain of causation has to be present. The analysis has to be in depth, right? You have to understand that your chain of analysis, it's not only that your chain of analysis has to be complete, but your explanation has to be in depth as well. It's not that you just complete, but the explanation has to be proper as well, right? Another thing to make sure is that to make sure to consider analysis that to go in depth. While there is a possibility that your chain of analysis would be complete, your explanation would be surface level. So maybe what your analysis is complete, that is you're connecting the things, but the explanation that you are giving is on a very surface level, on a very basic level. Do you understand, guys, what I am saying? If you do understand right now at this point of the video, do mention in the comments that you understand, because tomorrow is your exam. I want to know whether all the students who are watching this video right now are understanding or not. So, okay guys, so please do mention in the comments. Also, so for example, look at this now. Complete chain, the chain is complete, but the analysis is limited. Because, I've tried to explain what I was saying over here by giving a response. So for example, you say that public goods are non-excludable and non-rival risks. This causes a free rider problem, due to which free market has no incentive to provide them. Now look at this line. The chain is complete, but the analysis is limited. So, and now a lot of students would be like, oh my God, what the hell? I mean, why is this a problem? Why is this analysis a problem? He's writing correctly. He is, but it is not in depth. This is not what is required in A-levels, or this is not the level required in A-levels. In A-levels, in-depth explanations are required. Otherwise, you will end up scoring less marks. And that is the reason why thresholds are so low. So what would be the in-depth analysis with a complete chain? Now look at this. Look what I've written. Public goods are non-excludable. Okay, so first see the problematic chain of, the problematic analysis. Although chain is complete, it says public goods are non-excludable, non-rival risks. This causes free rider problem. Now he doesn't really explains how non-excludability and non-rival risk causes the free rider problem. Although the student does mention, the candidate does mention free rider problem. But why? Why is it causing the free rider problem? And then he says due to which the free market has no incentive. While he's right, but the way it is executed is a problem. It's not about what you write, it's about how you write it. And now look at this, response 2. Look at response 2, focus on response 2. Public goods are non-excludable, meaning, now it explains the meaning that once they are provided, we cannot stop anyone from consuming them because they're non-excludable. And they're non-rival risks, meaning that consumption by one person does not reduces the availability or the utility for other people. Then it says this causes the free rider problem, but why? This is also mentioned. Because anyone can use these goods without paying for them, due to which free market has no incentive to provide these goods since public goods won't yield any economic benefits to them. This is the complete chain. Now look at the examiner notes. Examiner notes number 1, response 1. Response 1, this is response 1. Okay. Response 1 correctly identifies the chain of causation. However, the analysis remains somewhat limited as it does not delve into the economic implications or consequences of the free rider problem. By the way, this entire document is created by me. So all these responses and the examiner notes, I've spent a lot of time in formulating this. Please Do mention in the comments if you're understanding this, because this would really matter to me because of the effort that I'm putting in making this video and the effort that I've made in, forming this and formulating this document. So please let me know that if you guys are following this, and also after you're done with tomorrow's exam, do connect with me on Instagram. Let me know how did it go and whether this document did really help you out or not. Also, so if you're saying, so the response, right, it says response correctly identifies the chain of causation. However, the analysis remains limited as it does not delve into the economic implications, which obviously it doesn't. Response 1 doesn't explain the economic implications, or neither it explains the consequence of the free rider problem. The response could be improved by elaborating on how the free rider problems leads to market failure and why the free market lacks incentive to provide public goods. While the chain of analysis is complete, the depth of analysis could be enhanced to provide a more comprehensive understanding of the topic. Right? And that is why you see the students are always crying in economics that I don't know why, marks are not given, why the subject content is so easy, public goods, piece of cake, I'll write the answer. You have to understand the marking technique. You have to understand how you have to write the answer or what is expected of you. Moving forward, response 2 offers a thorough in-depth analysis of public goods. This comprehensive analysis effectively illustrates the economic rationale behind market failure, obviously, associated with public goods. Overall, this response demonstrates a strong grasp of the topic and meets the criteria for a complete chain with in-depth analysis in an economics exam. And these sort of analysis will help you score full marks in your analysis in your 8 and 12 mark questions. Also, moving forward, as far as the evaluation is concerned, assessment objective 3 for questions like discuss, assess whether, consider whether or not, assess the likely success, discuss which factors are more. All of these questions are questions that would involve evaluation, and obviously evaluation involves weighing up the arguments and then coming to a judgment or a conclusion. And make sure that your conclusion is recent. You may be asked to come up with a recent conclusion following an assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of these arguments, which would obviously precede evaluation in your analysis, taking into account the quality of the information available, right? So how to apply the assessment objective and access its marks? I think I had covered this in my video on assessment objectives in detail. But just to quickly, you compare and contrast the arguments against each other. That is, weigh up the arguments, assess the strengths and weaknesses of each argument, considering factors like validity, relevance, and coherence. For example, questions like discuss whether monetary policy is more effective than supply side policy over here, right? Determine which arguments are more compelling and persuasive based on the evidence and reasoning provided, right? Taking into account multiple perspectives of the issue. Things, for example, while rise in aggregate demand can lead to inflation, but the Keynesian viewpoint says it depends upon the spare capacity or the level of the economic activity. If you're into a deep recession, a rise in AD will not cause a potential increase in demand for inflation. So based on your analysis, and I don't have a lot of time to go into a lot of details, otherwise, in my own classes, I've spent a lot of time in explaining how this actually works, but we have less time for this video and I apologize for that. So I need to, wrap things up. But based on your analysis and evaluation of the arguments, you come up with a reasoned judgment or conclusion. Your conclusion has to be reasoned. Please. Reasoned judgment or reasoned conclusion. Right? And I'll explain now. Here also I will explain the problems. So now if you look at this question statement, discuss whether transition from a planned economy to a market economy will always benefit consumers. Now, by the way, don't get, no need to freak out. I know transition is not part of your syllabus anymore. This is just given for reference and just given for, to sort of prove a point. But transition is not in your syllabus in AS anymore. So anyways, but transition from a planned economy to a market economy means that your economy moves from planned to market. So what it means is that, for example, now here I have posted 2 responses, evaluation and conclusion both, and response 1 and response 2. Response 1 is a weak evaluation and a biased evaluation. That is as an evaluation followed by a conclusion. So for example, this is one paragraph that includes both, right? Now, if you look at response 1, and response 1 states that a transition from a planned economy to a market economy is always good for consumers. Problem number 1, it says always good, with no reasoning. Now you'll see. Planned economies are inefficient and restrict individual choice. How can you say that? Because there are, so the wording is wrong. That doesn't mean that planned economies do not have inefficiency. They do have, but the way it is presented, now I'll tell you. So moving to a market economy will automatically lead to benefits for consumers because they will have more options and competition. Now, this is a biased evaluation. I mean, you've just preferred market economies over planned economies with no reason, with no justifying reasoning for it, right? And you say that it will automatically lead to benefits for consumers because they will have more options and competition will leave prices down. Then you say government interference only creates, and you're such a biased evaluation. So you see, government interference only creates problems and slows down the progress. Rapid transition is the best approach to avoid wasting time. Pure free markets are ideal as they allow for maximum efficiency and growth. Now, this response one is, by the way, the response of an actual candidate. Mixed economies just lead to unnecessary regulations and inefficiency. So the quicker the transition to a free market, the better. This is a biased evaluation. And such a conclusion, although it seems correct, is not graded well by the examiner. And do you even know what the examiner will put, what sort of a mnemonic will the examiner put against this? The examiner will put this. The examiner will put this, any, not established, a statement made without any support. If you're saying that planned economies are better, he'll put this any, because in your CIs, the checking is not done like this, that the way your answer scripts are checked in your school exams, right? There are mnemonics given, and this is what it is. Although I'll see if I have time for this, but you have the examiners, they put a question mark against if they think that something is uncertain and what the candidate means, an illogical line of thought. So it means that the examiner is looking at whether the line is illogical or not. He knows that if the student is illogical or there's an illogical line, he will write that, right? If he sees that a student is confused, he will write CON, confused, right? If he sees that a student has repeated something, he'll write REP. He doesn't write that. I mean, okay, anyways. So NAQ, not answered the question, right? Any, not established a statement. TV stands for too vague. So he'll put TV there, too vague, right? Anyways, now coming back, basically, so this was a weak and biased evaluation. Now, although a balanced evaluation, a developed and balanced evaluation would be that you say, oh, now look at this. You say, overall, the transition from planned economy to a market economy can have significant benefits for the consumers, but it is not a guarantee that it will always be advantageous. While there are potential benefits, there are downsides as well. So you see how the evaluation and then the conclusion will be formed. The success of the transition from a planned economy will depend on, remember I talked to you what evaluation say instills, it depends on. When you want to basically come to a conclusion, coming to a conclusion means that you come to a point of view, or you come to your point of view. But for that, you need to tell the factors that why you are saying that. It will depend on the effectiveness of the government. A successful transition requires competent governance to oversee and manage the process, and this would help in avoiding any, bureaucratic hurdles and maintain stability during the transition. Moreover, the effectiveness of the transition would depend on the effectiveness of the policies, and moving too quickly can lead to disruption, etc., and all of these are justifications. And then, so now look at this. So a gradual, well-planned transition is essential to ensure a smoother and more successful transformation. In the end, it is important to acknowledge that achieving a pure free market system is never entirely possible. And then you suggest an alternative viewpoint. A mixed economic system would be achieved, which is a better deal. This is because free market system entirely unregulated would lead to market failures, such as the externalities and non-provision public goods. Hence, in the light of these factors. So you're mentioning why you're saying this. Most modern economies strike a balance between both systems and harness a mixed economy, right? So now look at response one. Response one was one-sided and biased evaluation, which lacks depth and fails to consider both sides of the picture. It fails to offer a balanced judgment. This was a balanced judgment, response two. Response two is a developed and balanced evaluation, which acknowledges both sides of the response, also provides factors which the success of transition depends on, right? But if you look at response one, it just says a transition from planned economy to market economy is always good for consumers. Planned economies are inefficient, restrict individual choice. Moving to a market economy will be better, and government interference creates problems, etc., And then it says mixed economy just leads to unnecessary regulation, inefficiency. So the quicker the transition, the better, without any justification. Why are you saying that? So this is a biased evaluation. They are not welcomed in the exam. They will not get you good marks. Assess And another example, for example, now this is more relevant to you because obviously that transition was not in your syllabus, so probably you might be feeling blank when I was explaining it, but now you will not. So look at this. Assess whether supply side policies can reduce inflation. So response one, correct assertion but no justification, that you say overall, to conclude, supply side policies are useful in tackling inflation but will only be useful in the long run. Now you said it. Numerous times while checking the answers, this is what students write. And overall, supply side policies are useful, but will only be useful in the long run. Why? Because they write about time lags and all of that. It takes time to, the supply side policies to manifest potential growth in the long run. But that's fine. That's okay. But then this is not this is not the sort of conclusion or the judgment that is expected from an advanced level student. What is expected? Now look at this. You say, correct. This is a correct assertion. Supply side policies will be beneficial only in the long run, not in the short run. But give the justification. Now you say, overall supply side policies are indeed useful in tackling inflation. However, it will only be useful in the long run due to the inherent limitation of time lags associated with the policies. It will take significant time since the implementation of the policy and actual result. Now, obviously, one more thing. A lot of the time, students do not explain what time lag. They do mention time lag, but they don't explain what time lags are. So time lag basically means the time that it will take when the policy is implemented to the time that the actual results will manifest itself. That's what a time lag is. And time lags are there in demand side policies as well and supply side policies as well, right? This arises because of administrative procedures, legislative processes, logistical challenges. Thus, by the time supply side works, other economic factors might reduce its effectiveness. So by the time your supply side factors actually try to reduce inflation, maybe your rising exports in the economy causes demand pull inflation side by side, and which could reduce the effectiveness of supply side policies in reducing inflation. That's what I'm saying, right? Temporarily, or might not be that effective. That's what I'm basically saying. Anyways, response one correctly asserts that supply side policies are useful in tackling inflation, but lacks justification for the claim. While it identifies a relevant economic concept and provides a clear assertion, it fails to provide any reasoning or justification to support the argument. You have to support the argument. Without proper justification, the response lacks depth and does not demonstrate a thorough evaluation of the issue. As a result, it may be considered incomplete and may not receive full marks. For example, the question says, discuss whether demand pull or cost push inflation is more harmful, or which of the two is more harmful. Discuss whether current account deficit or a trade deficit is a bigger problem, or discuss whether indirect taxes should be used, or maybe price control should be used to reduce market failures or the problem of demerit goods. So in that case, you can't just say, to conclude, hence we can say that indirect taxes are more useful. Hence to conclude, we can say monetary policy is more effective. Hence to conclude, we can say cost push inflation is more harmful. This is not how you write a conclusion. You will not get marks. You will spoil your grade. I'm telling you, if you do that. In contrast, response 2 not only makes the correct assertion regarding the usefulness of supply side policies in tackling inflation, but also provides a thorough justification for its argument. This gets the highest level evaluation marks since it results in a more balanced and justified assessment. A balanced assessment, right? This is what is very important. Now I will quickly run through the evaluation cheat sheet that I had drawn. For example, the comparison of the economic systems. The evaluation points that you can write is that in the real world, none of the economies could be completely free or planned. Obviously, it will always have mixed economies. Today, most modern economies are mixed economies. Thus, the role of the government is crucial for smooth running of the economy. Also, you could write that there may be great resilience on demand and supply for resources for efficiency, but when consumers and society gets exploited, government intervention becomes necessary. So yes, okay, fine. There is resilience as far as the demand and supply is concerned for resource allocation. We do have maximum consumer producer surpluses, but then that over there we assume that there are no externalities and there's no market failure. But but then in reality, society do gets exploited because of market failure, and hence that necessitates government intervention, right? As far as if the question asks you about how effective price controls could be, you will say the evaluation points could include that it depends on the effectiveness of the monitoring and the regulation of the free market. You could say that it depends upon So you will say that it depends upon the effectiveness of the monitoring and the regulation, of the markets, and after the price controls are implemented, and you'll say that it depends on how well the government tackles this. Also, after the post price controls, how the government tackles shortages and surpluses generated, and then you'll say that price controls, are only a short term relief, not a feasible solution for long term, since it disrupts the allocation of resources through market forces, right? So is inflation always harmful? I mean, it depends upon whether inflation was anticipated or not. Depends on what the rate of inflation is. 2 to 3% mild inflation acceptable. Beyond 10% becomes problematic. It shouldn't be in double digits. Depends on the cause of inflation. If demand pull or cost push. Is economic growth always beneficial? Depends upon the speed of the economic growth. Too rapid cause of economic growth can result in overheating of the economy. Too slow economic growth will not have a significant impact. It depends upon whether the economic growth is equitable or not, whether it is fair or not, it benefits everyone or not. Are the benefits equally distributed among population or only to the wealthy people, right? So it depends upon the sustainability of the economic growth as well. The fact that economic growth might result in negative externalities and resource depletion is the point to be considered as well. That whether is the society really better off of economic growth or not in the long term, right? And is protectionism justified? Depends upon the repercussions of protectionism. Will partners retaliate or not? It depends upon the PED for imports and exports. Depends upon whether the Marshall condition is met or not. If you don't want to mention Marshall condition, that's okay, but do mention about the fact that it depends upon the PED for imports and exports. Also, it depends whether industries will become over reliant on protectionist measures or not. If so, then better not to implement. If you think that industries will become reliant, then it's better not to implement. Might be beneficial for short term, but it's not. Protectionism is not a sustainable long term solution. You can't just impose tariffs for the long term, because obviously modern economies, and because of how much the benefits free trade does, and it's not, I mean, it's a short term solution, not a sustainable solution for the long term. Effectiveness of policies regarding the monetary fiscal supply side policies, do consider about the time lags, consideration of the trade-offs that is made. Obviously, demand pull expansionary policies could result in inflation, although it may reduce unemployment. And also consider the cost of the economic policies, that is the limitation of the policies. Also remember that one policy is never the solution, or holistic approaches to be incorporated, various economic policies together to achieve the economic goals. So for example, the questions here discuss whether monetary policies or fiscal policy, you say that implement both and also implement supply side policies. So do mention other policies as well that could be used in corroboration, or in together as a holistic approach, right? So I'm going a bit fast because I just want to quickly brush up things. I mean, we don't have a lot of time for this. Comparison of exchange rate systems, which one is better? Obviously, the fact that so although you don't have fixed and managed floating exchange rate in your AS syllabus, so I'll leave this. But is current account deficit always harmful or not? Depends upon the magnitude of the deficit. Is it too large, moderate, or insignificant? Depends upon what portion of the net exports as a percentage of GDP. As in, it depends. So for example, if your exports are a huge percentage, or if your net exports as in form a huge percentage of your GDP, so in that case, if your exports goes down, then that would cause a huge current account. I mean, not only will that cause a deficit, but it will cause your economy to slow down as well, and might probably result the economy in a recession, because your GDP is coming primarily from international trade and exports, right? So higher exports, if your exports are a bigger percentage of your GDP, which means that if your net exports are the primary driver of your GDP and growth and employment and taxation, then if your current account deficit is very high, it means that your exports are low and your imports are high. And this would then become a serious problem for the economy as well, for the economic well-being and the economic stability as well, because it could be recessionary then, and massive unemployment could be created. It depends upon the reason for the deficit as well. If the deficit is, due to, let's say, import of capital goods, it could foster economic growth over the long term. Also remember that a deficit today implies a surplus in the future. Also remember the fact that, if you have a free floating exchange rate, the deficit gets auto-corrected. Do mention about the auto-correction mechanism of free floating exchange rate. So maybe this implies that the government does not really needs to worry about the current account deficit, because the deficit will auto-correct itself, because if the exchange rate is freely floating, right? Anyways, guys, do remember that economic vocabulary plays a key role here. Don't write in layman language, write in economic terms. Instead of saying governments can't afford it, say government faces budget constraint. Instead of saying people can't afford it, say household face budget constraint. Instead of saying prices go down, say deflation setting in, prices going up, inflation creeping in, people can't find jobs, there is unemployment, more people entering the labor force participation. So if you're saying more people entering the labor force, say labor force participation rate is increasing. Inflation will hit people hard. Inflation would reduce the real incomes. Instead of saying people buy things, say consumption expenditure. Finding jobs, say seeking employment opportunities. People going on a vacation, say instead of, and this is a common thing. People going on a vacation, say households enjoying leisure time. People. If you're saying as in too high inflation, as in you're trying to implement, so too high inflation could either mean too high inflation in the context that if it's like, prices are going up by 200-300%, then you could mention, hyperinflation. Otherwise, you could use the terms accelerating inflation as well, or high inflation as well. People won't know about the benefits of merit goods. As in, instead of you saying in the exam that why are merit goods underprovided, and it's because people don't really know how beneficial merit goods are, say there's information failure in the market. And then do mention the information failure. Not only are people are not even aware of the private benefits, but they are not properly aware of the external benefits as well. When AD falls, prices fall. A fall in AD reduces inflationary pressures. Increasing interest rates reduces aggregate demand. Increasing interest rates will have a contractionary effect on GDP. Rise in government spending increases GDP. A rise in government spending stimulates growth. So it all depends upon the economic vocabulary. Make sure that you use good economic vocabulary. Guys, see, instead of saying the government should implement fiscal policies to increase GDP, you could say the government could implement policy demand side policies to stimulate growth, foster growth, stimulate growth. May result, and because that would result in increase in GDP, you could say that instead of always using you could say instead of always using expansionary fiscal policy or expansionary monetary policy, you could say a loose monetary policy. Or instead of saying contractionary monetary policy, you could say a tight monetary policy, right? Also, always saying increasing GDP, writing 100 times in the paper about increasing GDP in a macro section C paper, you could say economic expansion or economic contraction. Economic expansion means increasing GDP, right, guys? So I hope I have covered everything. And as far as this document is concerned, I will not be able to share this document with you all since this was created for the students who were registered in my courses. However, I have shared useful information with you all which should be enough for you to ace things tomorrow. Guys, now in the end, I wish you the very best of luck. Do remember me in your prayers, and I will be praying for you all as much as I can. You guys have worked very hard. I trust you all. I trust each and every one of you who's watching this video right now. I have full faith in you that you will ace it, and I wish you the best. Just smash it, guys. Smash the paper tomorrow and let me know how it went. Do mention in the comments how did you find this video, and share this video as many people as you can, because so that the maximum students can benefit from this video who have their exam tomorrow. So that's it, fellas. Big day for you all tomorrow, and I will be signing off here with lots of prayers and best wishes for you all, and I will be waiting for your feedbacks tomorrow. And tomorrow, just remember that tomorrow you got to prove yourself, because tomorrow is your day. It is your day, right? You have to prove that you are the best, and tomorrow is your day to do that, right, guys? All the best wishes for you all, and until then, take care.